Well, it's resolving faster than I expected. Ukraine is they've there are about 500,000 dead Ukrainian soldiers. So I hope Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan and Victoria Nuland are happy with that, because they said they'd fight to the last Ukrainian, and they're doing a pretty good job. About 500,000 dead. Um, Ukraine's military is in a complete state of collapse. If they're fighting, they're losing. Many of them are surrendering. There are mutinies. There are desertions. When they retreat, it's not an orderly fighting retreat to a defensive position. It's more like running for your life, and the Russians are annihilating them with drones and heavy, heavily armored helicopters, bombers, other weapon systems, minefields, etc. They're now sending 70-year-olds out. They're sending 17-year-olds out. When I say they, I mean the Ukrainians. They've instituted a draft. I haven't been there, but I get a lot of pretty good intelligence. They say the streets of Kharkov, Kiev, Lvov are empty because younger men, say between 17 and 30, are hiding or leaving the country, or staying inside because they don't want to be dragooned off the streets and sent to the front lines. They say if you get to the front lines, your life expectancy is about 3 hours. That's how long it takes for the Russians to kill them. So they're getting beyond desperate. The wonder weapons have all failed. We sent them HIMARS, precision guided artillery, precision missiles that took the Russians almost no time to figure out how to jam the GPS, so the missiles don't know where to go. They just go off course. We sent them Patriot anti-missile batteries, $1 billion a piece. I think we sent about 9. The only problem is that those anti-missile batteries cannot shoot down hypersonic missiles. The Russians have hypersonic missiles, so they've been blowing them up one at a time. There aren't many left. They got Challenger tanks from the UK, Leopard tanks from Germany, Abrams tanks from the US, and also Bradley fighting vehicles from the US. They've all been left burning on the battlefield, completely ineffective. The armor's ineffective. So one by one, the Storm Shadow missiles, most of them are shot down. They're pretty much out of them. They're out of 155 millimeter artillery shells because the Russian economy is making like 1 million a month. They're on a complete war footing. Western economies, the U.S. is struggling to open one factory that might make 30,000 a month, 300,000 a month, except it's not open. So we're still trying to do that, and our own supplies have been depleted. This is not just a question of Ukraine losing. It's a question of Western arsenals being stripped. All these weapons are defective anyway, meaning they're obsolete and don't work against Russian offensive capabilities. But even allowing for that, we don't have anything left. So everything, and the economic sanctions, I mean, I teach a course in financial warfare at the U.S. Army War College. I told my class, it was over 2 years ago, it was April 2022, right after the war began. I said the sanctions will fail. U.S. sanctions on Russia will fail, but it will be worse than that. Not only will they fail, but they'll boomerang and hurt the U.S. economy more than it hurts Russia. I just looked at the data. I don't have it all at my fingertips, but by every significant metric, unemployment, inflation, GDP growth, debt to GDP ratio, manufacturing PMIs, et cetera. The Russian economy is greatly outperforming the U.S. economy. And in particular, the one that caught my eye was debt to GDP ratio. Russia is 17%, practically debt free. The U.S. is, we mentioned, about 125%, way past the point where the debt can create enough growth to even pay the debt. So nice job, Janet Yellen. Nice job, Wally Adeyemo, the Deputy Secretary of the Treasury. The sanctions have been a complete failure, but they keep upping the ante. The newest thing is to steal $300 billion of US Treasury securities owned by Russia. That's a good way to sink the US government securities market. It won't work. They might try to do it. They're going to try to do it at the, reach consensus at the G7 summit meeting in Apullia, Italy, which is coming up on June 13th. So just about 2 weeks away. Not clear what they'll do. There's some talk of floating a $50 billion bond issue backed by the Russian assets. It's just a backdoor way of stealing them. It's a structured solution to stealing the assets. Some talk about just using the interest, not the principal. That's about it's earning those assets are earning about $3 billion a month. So it's been 2 years. So there's about $6 billion of interest pile up. It's just a smaller theft instead of a $300 billion theft. They're all part of why the world is trying to de-dollarize and get away from US Treasury securities. Now, it does not mean if they do it, and they're trying to do it, and I expect they will in some form, it does not mean the US Treasury market collapses the next day. I mean, you hear of hysterical claims like that. That's not going to happen. But at the margin, it diminishes confidence in US Treasury securities. And if you felt that, and they do, you're a finance minister, head of a central bank in a country that's running a trade surplus, and you're getting dollars, and you have to decide what to do with the money, no different than your clients. How do you allocate your assets? Well, all of a sudden, U.S. Treasury securities don't look so good because the U.S. is in the business of stealing them. Do you like Japanese government bonds, German bonds, or Italian government notes any better? I don't think so. If you lose confidence in the U.S. Treasury securities market, why do those other vassal states look better when it comes to their government bond markets? So you pretty quickly end up buying gold. You don't have to be a gold bug. Just you as an asset allocator, if you can't trust the Western, I just mentioned the 4 biggest government bond markets in the world: Japan, Germany, Italy, and the U.S. If you can't trust them, and you want something liquid, you're not going to buy real estate, not with your reserve position. You're going to buy gold. And that's part of what's driving the price of gold higher. So again, despite 2 years of failure, the U.S. and NATO seem to want to double down with this stealing the Russian assets. And the other thing Putin will do, or two other things Putin will do. And by the way, the thing that policymakers don't understand about Putin, he doesn't bluff. He actually thinks hard about what he says, what he's going to say, gets a lot of advice. If he says something, you can put it in stone. He's going to do it. So he's already said, if the West steals these Russian assets, and as I mentioned, they're planning to do that maybe in as early as about 2 weeks, he's going to expropriate all the Western assets in Russia. And guess what? There are more Western assets in Russia than there are U.S. Treasury securities in the Russian reserve position, well over 300 billion. Massive oil infrastructure from BP and Shell. Other oil companies. You can still buy Coca-Cola in Moscow if you happen to be there. Take the Coca-Cola business. A lot of U.S. companies made a show, we're getting out of Russia at the start of the war, but they didn't really, and they might have changed some brands, and closed some outlets, but there are still massive investments. So Putin will just take all that, give it to Rosneft or Gazprom or any of the other large Russian companies. But that's not the most dangerous thing he can do, which I expect he will. 200 billion out of the 300 billion of Russian-owned U.S. Treasury securities that they're planning to steal are in a place called Euroclear.